Okay, so let's talk about Edward's response. All right. Now, before we do, well, let's say Edward responded. And before we watch it, it's very short. I do want to address because some people were very upset with my take, and I understand why. And I just wanted you guys to understand something. Like my general position on it is not going to change. However, I do understand some of your frustrations, and I will say that I do feel that I could have been more sensitive when I was explaining it and explain it better. I mean, that comes down to my failure as a content creator. I talk about controversial issues, and sometimes I don't bring the correct air to, or the correct, would you say, mood, air? I don't know if you know what I'm talking about. The correct energy to the video. You know, it was a very, and I'm going to address a couple of comments too. I'm going to answer your questions, and you probably won't be happy with this, but I do want to talk about it. There's two pretty big areas that people were very upset about, understandably so. The first one, though, was the aspect where I said this wasn't grooming, and I'm going to hold to it. Grooming isn't just dating an underage person. Grooming is a very meticulous, methodical, manipulative process of generating a dependency onto that person and prepping them for like some kind of a sexual violation. Okay, it's not just sleeping with somebody that's underage. I need you guys to understand that, especially with their age gap. Right? It's a very methodical process that requires intent of sexual assault as well. Like there's a lot here. And even the legal definition from what I could find, it talks about how it's these people that are 16 and under. I'll zoom in and I'll read this. So the winning of confidence of a victim in order to commit a sexual assault on him or her, now a specific criminal offense, although the most well-known stories are about the use of an email or other chat rooms that may be committed by communication using any means and may be initiated from anywhere in the world. A person A, age 18 or over, commits an offense if having met or communicated with person B at least two earlier occasions he, 1, intentionally meets B, 2, travels with the intention of meeting B in any part of the world, 3, at the time he intends to do anything to or respect of B during or after the meeting and in any part of the world, which is to be done and involve a commission of A. B is under 16. B does not reasonably believe B is over 16, 16 or over. Okay, so it seems like based on this, you know, you have to be 16 or younger, or 15 or younger, really. Now, I know that you can groom adults, but again, when it comes to grooming, it's the methodical aspect of it. It's a very deep level of a manipulation. Like, it's not... We have a really big problem of using the wrong words all the time. And it hurts what those words mean. There are people who have very, very serious grooming trauma, and, like, that's a very deep process. This isn't that. I need you guys to understand that. I'm not saying that she wasn't violated or in a manipulative situation or even abused in some ways. I'm going to clarify those more. I'm saying this wasn't grooming. And the problem is that, like, you guys are very incorrect about the grooming. But you're taking that and you're maintaining the grooming energy throughout this entire video. The general take that I got was that this was a very toxic relationship because two people that shouldn't have been together stayed together. Now, there are definitely areas where he was really shitty. Before we get into that, if you said, hey, this is statutory rape, yeah, I think so. I understand that she's 17, he was 23, and it was in California. I believe that would be covered by statutory rape. That's, if he gets charged with that, I don't care. Good. Right? Now, I will say that California, there's like a clause in California where, you know, if the individual who interacts with somebody between the ages of 14 and 17, and if they could be upwards of 10 years older than them, and it's up to the judge's discretion whether to charge it, which is pretty fucked up. I think that's probably the worst age of consent law I've ever heard of. But my point is that it's not grooming, right? So, the next, Jesus, okay, now I'm sorry, I off-tracked myself. Right, yeah, no, it's fucked up. Potentially 14 and 24. Yeah, isn't that fucking disgusting? It's crazy. Anyway, I do understand that there were areas of abuse, right? For instance, he finished it, or he ejaculated inside of her when she non-consensually. That would be, if my understanding is, that's a form of sexual assault. I've told it that's terrible. That's a manipulative process. There's a time where he got violent with her. That's absolutely abuse, right? If we charged him with those things, absolutely. Now, she did make a reference that she also engaged in some of like the fighting. I don't really know the specifics. Again, this seems like a very toxic relationship, right? I should have been more sensitive to that. Absolutely, right? So that's shitty of me. So the next issue, though, is people were very upset because I said, like, oh, why didn't you leave? I asked that question, and like I was, again, like, this is where the level of insensitivity comes into play. Okay, I just want you guys to know, like, this isn't like an excuse, because you guys should hold me accountable, and I understand why people like they lash out the way they did. Uh, I do content like pretty much every day, usually 5 days a week, and like I get through cycles where I'm not, like, for various life reasons, I'm not necessarily in the best framework to be doing this. It doesn't mean that it's okay, but sometimes I don't carry the correct air. Right, like I remember last week I was a little. I fucking hate talking about this shit. I was a little depressed, whatever. I wasn't, whatever. I don't feel like getting into it. That's not really what I want to talk about. But I fucked up. But I want you to know it wasn't intentional. So I want to play this video. This is someone on TikTok. It was actually very cool. They reached out to me through TikTok. They tagged me, and then they expressed like an issue. I'm going to talk about this, and then I'm going to talk about the why did she leave thing, because people are saying like, oh well, I understand that why did they leave, or why didn't they leave, is used as an invalidating tactic. And I'm going to explain, I'm going to elaborate on that as to why it's a bit different here. Okay? So let's listen to this first. Then I'm going to respond to that.
Hey, I'm going to rant about something that's so specific, but I just want to talk about this specific subject. Okay, so you know how in abusive relationships, there's that question of like, why don't you leave? And I'm gonna be honest, I was watching Papa Gut's recent video on the whole Nikki and Edward. Is that his name? I don't even know his name. But I was like catching up on all that. And this YouTuber, Papa Gut, who I love, like I'm a huge fan of him. Yes, like I disagree with him, but I still watch him because I think he's entertaining as fuck, and you can watch people that you disagree with, you know, because that's how the real world works sometimes. But for real, like on a real note, like he was talking about that whole, it's not drama, but you know, the whole situation. And he was often asking, like, why didn't she leave? Why didn't she leave sooner? Because there was no threat of violence, right? Like if you watch his video, you'll know what I'm talking about. But anyway, so this really like struck a chord with me, because when I was young, like I've never been groomed, but I have, like when I was in middle school, I would be talking to older men on purpose, and I would be like, yes, like I'm such a bad bitch. Thought my mom was coming home. Hold on. I only talk when I'm home alone. And honestly, it's a bit of a different story for me because I was in middle school, which is even younger, like 13 or 14. She was 17 when the whole thing started. But still, like, he was saying that she could have left at any point. But I don't think what he understood was what generally happens to, and this is just me being blunt because I've been there before, mentally unstable, people pleaser type people, you know? Because many times in Nikkis' video, she's like, oh, because you take advantage of the fact that I'm a good person and that I, you know, want to still talk to you. And that's, I completely understood where she was coming from, because it's like, you want to break up with this person because you feel so abused, but like you just wish it could work out. You want it to work out so bad, and you're also scared of like changing your life, you know?
So I want to say, like, I understand that like 100% because I've been there before. I understand being with somebody that's not like treating you very well and not leaving them because you think like, okay, I can change this, or you'll have a conversation with them and they'll make a change and but it'll be temporary, and then they go revert back to their old ways, and then you're fucking like don't know what the fuck to do, and you're trying not to give up on somebody because they might have a particular issue in their life, and you don't want to just abandon them because they're a victim in some capacity. You know what I'm saying? I understand that. I do. However, when I asked the question of, and I probably should have let them finish, but when I asked the question of like, why didn't you leave? There's a specific reason why. And I understand when it comes to abusive relationships, like that's not so easy. When we talk about abusive relationships, there's different types of abuse, of course, right? We have to acknowledge that different type of abuse, right? There's like verbal abuse, emotional abuse, physical abuse, sexual abuse, right? Now, I wouldn't say that Edward was being consistently sexually abusive, though he did sexually abuse her when he, you know, ejaculated in her without any consent. I would consider that sexual abuse. Physical abuse, she mentioned an instance of physical abuse. I don't know if there was a pattern of it. It's definitely inappropriate. Again, if he gets charged with stuff like that, totally fine. Verbal and emotional, you know. See, here's the thing, is I don't know if I would necessarily call it abuse or incredibly toxic. And maybe this is my bias because I've been in toxic relationships. But yeah, sure. The reason I said, like, why didn't you leave is because a lot of times people are in these situations feel like they can't leave. However, Nikki tried to leave multiple times, and what convinced her to stay wasn't him abusing her in some capacity. It was him begging her until she accepted. Right, and she made the choice to stay, probably for this reason. Like maybe she wanted to help Edward. Maybe she seems to be a much better person than Edward. She wanted to help him. She wanted to be there for him. There might be like a myriad of reasons that make her a very good person that stayed, but that doesn't necessarily mean she could. That doesn't mean she couldn't leave. Right? She made the conscious choice not to. I know that you keep saying she was manipulated, but she wasn't. Like I generally speaking, he seems very manipulative. But she was on her way out. She said, "I'm going to leave," and then he begged her to stay. Right? Now, maybe he did manipulate it. He might have said, "I'll change for you. I'll do this, that, and the other thing." And he may not have meant it and did it as a manipulative tactic. Or what's very common is people will say they're going to change and they mean it, and then they stop caring after a little while and they don't make the conscious effort anymore. People will only make the effort when they want to. There's a difference between not being able to leave because they're, and I mentioned this, some kind of a threat onto somebody. Hold on. There has to be, usually we're talking about some kind of threat onto you or maybe your kid or even that person, right? Like we talked about at the end of the video, towards the end, she mentioned that he threatened to kill himself. And I've been there. I even said I've been there. And that's why I didn't leave one of my toxic relationships. What you have to understand though, right? What you have to understand though, is that she didn't take it as a credible threat. She even said that I believe that she laughed at him and said, "You're not going to do it." And then he didn't do it. Now, I want you to understand, that's the correct way to do it. I applaud her for the way that she handled that. And that is shitty and manipulative from him, absolutely. But she didn't believe it was a credible threat. And she even proved it wasn't a credible threat instantaneously. So when we talk about why didn't she leave, I'm not trying to blame her, like victim blame her. What I'm saying is that she went to leave and then he convinced her to stay. We'd have to know the specific reasons why. If he was like, "Oh, I'll change for you. Right? And he didn't change. Either he's manipulative or he's just shitty and didn't change, because like a lot of times, again, people will say they'll change and then they'll try for a little bit and then they won't change overall. It happens all the time. That doesn't make it manipulative. That just makes him really shitty in that capacity. I'm not saying he's not manipulative. I'm just saying in that capacity. You guys have to understand that. We're talking about very controversial topics, and I know that you guys get very uncomfortable, right? I understand that. What if she had nowhere to go? You're right. No, I didn't mention that her parents weren't involved. It seemed like she was working and she was able to disconnect from that situation fairly easily, right? In some capacity, right? That is a good question though, because if she had absolutely nothing and there was nothing that she could have done and there was nowhere for her to go, that's a great reason. That is a great thing to bring up. Thing is that based on her story she told, that wasn't her. She was able to get a job and move in with like her sister. She even mentioned that she just needed to get a job so she could help pay her sister rent to move in with her sister. Right. When we talk about something like they couldn't leave, we're usually talking about somebody that's older. A lot of times a wife in a situation with an abusive husband where the wife doesn't work and the husband won't let her work, or he'll beat her, and if she leaves, he'll beat the kids. And then if she does leave and she goes to and if they go to like an abuse place, what the fuck, like a battered women's shelter, doesn't do shit for them, they end up back in the situation. That's a complete like failure of having nobody around you to help you and not being able to disconnect or help yourself. Edward wasn't that person, honestly. He's shitty, but he wasn't like this deep-seated, like methodically abusive person. He seems to be a very shitty person. But we need to understand, like, there's a difference. I'm not saying he's a good person. I'm not saying that, like, oh, Edward's such a nice guy. I even said Edward seems like an asshole. And I do understand that the way that I came off in my video, I totally understand why people got very upset. But again, like, we talk about controversial topics. Sometimes I don't talk about it in the correct way. Sometimes I don't express myself in the best way. And that's my failure as a content creator. But I'm still holding to, like, what I'm saying is it's not grooming, and she could have left. That doesn't mean that what he did to her was okay. That doesn't mean that him choking her, it doesn't make it okay. Like, if he did do that, he should be in jail, right? And it seems like he did do that. Like, I'm not trying to say he didn't do that, right? My point is, though, is that, like, there was an option to leave without her feeling threatened, and she didn't leave, and she should have. And, like, that's honestly a very normal relationship process, to stay in failed relationships that you shouldn't stay in. And it's something that I understand. I'm 31 years old, and I know, and there's a lot of people who tend to be younger and I'm not trying to be dismissive of you, but I don't have as much life experience and haven't experienced different types of relationships, that don't understand the nuances of relationships. Toxic relationships where people are shitty to each other doesn't necessarily create a very abusive relationship. And we have to understand that. That's just something that I'm just trying to express there, okay? That's what I'm trying to say.
Because you could just like stay in it, deal with it. You've been through it for years now. So you kind of try to
Yeah.
and also it comes from insecurity. If you're not really secure in yourself because your partner is constantly telling you the opposite thing or begging you to stay, it really fucks with your mind. And so it's likely for a lot of people like me and Nikki to just be stuck in one place, and it's ourselves stopping ourselves, but it's so real. It's like a mind barrier. I don't know what the word is. Fuck it.
No, I understand what she's saying, or they are saying. I'm assuming it's a she. Any pronouns. Okay, they are. I don't know. You get my point. Sorry.
Hey, I'm gonna
I try to keep it in my mind. I understand what they're saying. I do. I think that's the best critique in the way that they're expressing it. I think I should have explained what I said, but I already explained my perspective on it. I get it. Right? I understand that there are people pleasers, people who try to fix people. I am one of them. I know I'm a fucking 350-pound guy. But like I've been there, man. Like I've really tried to help the people that like I've dated. And sometimes you're just helping the wrong person, and it can get very toxic, and it can get really shitty. And it can get shitty in both directions. And maybe I'm projecting too much of myself in my relationship of like understanding how toxic things will. I've never hit anybody like Edward, and I've never sexually assaulted a girl like Edward. But you under like the fundamentals. It seemed like a really toxic relationship, and she should have left. It doesn't excuse what he's done wrong, but that's simply what I was saying. And I am sorry if I emphasized it too much. That's my point, right? That's pretty much what I wanted to say. Yeah. So, I think that this was a very nice expression from this person. If you want to, like, what if I can zoom in? If you want to follow on TikTok, you do your thing. Yeah. So now let's get into Edward's. Let's get into Edward's video. Well, we'll get to Edward's video in a sec. You know what? Yeah. All right, here we go. So, no offense, Papa, gotta think you're a little uneducated with situations like SA and grooming. Now, I take that personally. I do take this genuinely personally because I think that I'm not trying to jerk myself off here, but I think that I'm one of the more educated people on sexual assault and grooming on this app and in general. I've already defended the grooming things. I would say, like, I do take this personally. You could say that you don't agree with me, but, like, I do a lot of, like, conversations about this stuff. I talk to people about sexual assault and grooming, people who've been sexually assaulted, people who've been groomed. Like, I do a lot to try to deeply understand these different types of situations. I assume you don't mean to, but the way that you discussed it, you were kind of blamed everybody but the abuser. I will say again that, like, I could have expressed my shit better. As someone who went through and knows situations like this, I hope you're reading the comments of what people are trying to say and simply understand the side of the people who know SA and grooming. Okay. Well, I will say that it's likely that not everybody is. I'm not trying to be like, this is what I do. This is what I do. And I know one of the interesting things is I know that my videos are very low effort. Right? I know that I come in and I watch a video and I give my takes on it. The thing is that my perspective is generally well educated from myself and on the topic I'm talking about, or at least I like to be, especially when it comes to like sexual assault. This is the core of my content. Sexual assault, grooming, inappropriate interactions. This is the core of my content. And I like to say that like I am educated on these topics better than most people. I'm gonna make that like just affirm that stance because I really am. I mean, I get things wrong, but I really am. And most of the time, people look at what I say when it comes to these topics, and there's a lot of people, and it's especially a lot of like women, especially like a lot of more middle-aged women, will say like, I appreciate your perspective on this, I appreciate this, I appreciate that, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Like, and I do appreciate your appreciation of my ability to express sexual assault culture. That's what it really boils down to. And I really do appreciate that. I think that if you watch my content and you generally agree with me, I think it's something to consider that it's possible that there are ways that you're wrong about what I'm talking about. But again, the air in which I carried this out, I think was inappropriate. So I understand that. Papa got not understanding narcissistic mental abuse for 2 hours straight. 45 minutes of it was understanding. You do realize you should have just left. We talked about that. Literally what every apologist ever says to mental abuse survivors. I understand. Again, I understand. Like, I get that general prescription of like, oh, you're getting abused by your husband and you have kids, why don't you just leave? I know that people do that to discount people's like potential abuse. But again, I've already explained this. Yeah, these are pretty much the same things that I already addressed. I guess I don't necessarily need to read these comments. You guys can be a guest and read them. Oh, here's a good one. She wasn't groomed because she didn't know it and was wrong at 17 years old. Family, Nicole, and Edward, blah, blah, blah. Here, okay. This is a conversation I was having with my wife yesterday, right? We're talking about child grooming in this situation. This is the thing. We're talking about, like, the grooming thing. Okay. Listen, a lot of young people don't understand what grooming is. A lot of people believe her. They go, she claims she was groomed and then gives really good examples of how she was manipulated and he was shitty. And they go, well, she must be correct. She's not. She wasn't groomed. I'm just letting you know. I'm not saying the relationship was okay. Part of the problem is the new age conversation that's being had by young people that don't really understand the ways in which these relationships are inappropriate. And I'm going to express them in the most honest way that I can. A lot of women, even young women, and my wife is one of those women, a lot of women express to me like, hey, when I was younger, I talked to an older guy. I want you guys to know, just to be very clear, as an older person, whether you're a guy or a girl, you shouldn't be interacting with younger people, right? For instance, like 20 and 16. You shouldn't be interacting with that person, right? Same things with like 17, 23. You shouldn't be interacting with that person. The thing is that every single one of these women who've come to me and said that they didn't like that they engaged with that older person, that they know it's not their fault. Every single one of them expresses that it was yucky, that they think about it now that they're older. But it doesn't mean that they even say like, I'm not like, I don't feel like I have any like trauma. There's no trauma associated with it, right? It's just uncomfortable and gross. And that's something I think people should understand, that it's not necessarily a traumatic event because you talk up to somebody who's older than you, like when you're 17, 23. It doesn't make it okay. But I feel like what's happening is people, through life experience, are teaching young people, hey, don't interact with people that are this much older than you or this much younger than you, but not really explaining why. And a lot of people are assuming that because you go through that experience means that you've experienced a trauma, when the reality is that you have a young person being taken advantage of by an older person that usually doesn't understand that this is inappropriate fully, like mentally. They'll usually brush it off and not give a shit. And like, I know people are going to like listen to that and they're probably going to get very upset, but this is kind of the reality if you talk to older people who've been through these situations. I'm not saying that there's no traumatic events that take place between somebody with like with this age gap, for instance. What I'm saying is usually it's more of this was a gross feeling that I have for going through that experience and I didn't know any better, rather than like, I have I have like a trauma associated with it. That's anecdotal. I have the most trauma from that age gap. Okay, that's so like, I'm not trying to be rude, but like I would say like, yeah, you have yours is more anecdotal than mine. This is the general understanding. Like there usually isn't going to be a developed trauma just from the age gap. There would be something else that's additional with that. I just want you to understand that. I'm not saying that you don't have a trauma at all. What I'm saying is that most people who have these different age experiences, it's not a traumatic event. I'm not saying that I'm not saying that you don't have it. And I appreciate that you said, right, I get that. I appreciate that you agree with me to some extent. I'm just talking about generally speaking, this is a more common occurrence than we even understand. And I'm just letting you know if like from that point. I'm not saying that a trauma can't be developed from this situation. I'm just saying that generally speaking, one isn't developed from that alone. I would say that usually wouldn't be developed from that alone. And I'm not even saying that she doesn't have any trauma. I'm just saying when it comes to the grooming aspect, we don't have grooming involved in here. We have a very inappropriate relationship that would probably be considered statutory rape. And that could be charged, which is totally fine. Yeah. I'm saying most people. Oh, you're okay. Most people who go after younger girls do so because they're easier to abuse and control. Being controlled is abusive itself, is it not? Sure. The thing is that like I think that there definitely are older people who go after younger people because they're easy to control, for sure. I don't think that this is one of those instances. It seems like this is somewhat, in whatever community they are in, this seems to be more normalized than it should be, right? She mentioned that she talked to older guys when she was younger. That's not her fault. It's really her failed parental system that happened with these engagements and the people who engaged with her. But it doesn't necessarily mean they're going after young people because they're easier to control. Although that does happen sometimes. Some older men are looking to go after young people because they're easier to control. Sometimes it's just like, oh, is this an appropriate age gap? Oh, I guess this is fine. Edward doesn't seem to be the kind of guy that's trying to specifically manipulate her. I know this is a very intense conversation. He seems like the kind of guy that does engage in relationships and then ends up being manipulative in those relationships. But it doesn't seem like he's targeting people who are easy to manipulate, if that makes any sense. And I could be wrong, but he just seemed to be a shitty person. So, now that we've gone through all that, Jesus Christ. I couldn't see any other reason to date a 17-year-old with you're an adult. Yeah, I understand that. So this is the reality here. Okay, here's what I'll tell you. We've made substantial, massive social progress in like the past 5 years even. I say more so than like the last 20 years before that. The reason I say that is like the internet has had like a very good impact on being able to get together and educate people on very important issues, which reach across the internet. The thing is, though, is that like realistically speaking, these age ranges are more normal to people who are older, right? So we are talking about somebody he's like 30 and she's like 23. This was more acceptable back then. I'm not saying it's okay, but this was a more acceptable age gap. And it's more normalized. It's more acceptable. I even brought up the age of consent map and see like how even now, even today, we have these really big age, like 16, 17. These are the ages of consent. And it's very easy for us in this sphere where we're like, this is what we're interested in. We talk about these inappropriate age gaps and like why it's not okay and why you shouldn't be engaging with somebody of like with these age gap. It's very easy for us to say like you did something wrong and like you know it and you did. The reality is most people don't care. And I know that's a bad thing. They should care. But most people look at that and go like, that's very normal. And it's unfortunate, but we have to acknowledge and we have to make sure that we're careful of trying not to prescribe today's moral framework onto the past. And I know it was only, 7 years ago? 6 years ago? But again, we've made substantial movement forward. So yeah, so the same person. My mom let me date a 25-year-old when I was 16. She did the same with my sister, and now my sister is 18 with 29. The old boyfriend. I think it's pretty normalized. Yeah, that's my point. It's still normalized. We're still not there, and that's where I'm coming from. Is like I understand it's normalized, but it shouldn't be. So I'm advocating for it to not be, but I also understand that the intention of people isn't always bad. It's just that these people aren't educated and they come from different backgrounds, right? And that's the point that I'm trying to make. And I know this is a very controversial topic and it's very loaded and it's a lot to talk about, but that's the point that I'm trying to make. But anyway, after all that, let's get into the Edward video. Hopefully, even if people disagree, you'll understand well, okay, I'll respond to this lastly. Ignorance, I understand what you're saying. Ignorance isn't an excuse, but it kind of is a little bit. And I want to explain, right? We understand that there's two things. There's action and then there's intent. Intent is important. It doesn't mean, like I said, we talked about this would be statutory rape. His intention may not have been to do that, but his actions seem to be that. I just don't know if they slept with each other when they're 17 and under. However, like intention is what would create a grooming scenario. Intentions are very, very, very important. It's just very important. That's all I'm trying to say. Okay, let's move on. Let's finally address this fucking response that Edward has gotten, and let's see where it goes.
What's up, you guys? Now, I know that this whole breakup situation was a very, very messy one. And it did not end smoothly at all. I do want to apologize to my viewers and to my fans that have no idea what's going on right now. And if you are a kid, I especially want to apologize to you because this situation is something that you guys shouldn't deal with at all or even choose sides on this situation. When I did see those accusations about me, I should have literally stepped back.
Well, it's only 3 minutes. That's why I'm watching it on normal speed.
And deal with this legally. Because at the end of the day, this is not a game, okay? We just can't go off of he said, she said type stuff. As of now, I am no longer going to be talking about this on the internet because this is something that needs to be sorted out privately. I do plan to address the allegations against me after speaking to my lawyer. Just know that I will keep posting videos on YouTube about my cringy 3 a.m. videos. I will keep posting on Instagram about my personal life, what I'm doing, the stuff that I've always done. I will keep posting silly, goofy, funny videos that have always represented me, my humor, the way I see the world. Nothing's going to change.
So the first thing I want to say, because we're starting to go in a weird direction, is like I do think that generally speaking, like, yeah, that's the way that it should be handled. She's making very heavy accusations. He should be defending himself. And I want you guys to understand something, because we live, like, listen, we do need to understand that you are innocent until proven guilty. I'm not trying to, like, give this guy, like, a free pass, but we do have to understand that, like, he's defending himself, and he's going to take it to the court. It makes sense to me. He's going to keep it out, if offline. It makes sense to me. Like I said, these situations do become, like, very much he said, she said, and it makes the most sense to deal with these privately. Like I said, this is a very, you have a very toxic relationship. You have a very toxic relationship. This is the best way that he should defend himself. That's my perspective. A lot of times, I don't think that people should be airing their fully. I'm not saying she shouldn't have said what she said. I understand why he's taking it in this direction. His first response, I think, was pretty bad, because he just simply, when she proved that they, or when he said that they didn't start talking until they're 18, his response was like, "Oh, yeah, see." And then, but she proved that wrong, right? So this is probably the best response, is to take it legally. It's a bit bizarre that he's talking about keeping and posting his cringy 3 a.m.s or fun 3 a.m. videos. It's just kind of like weird. It's okay. Let's keep going.
I'm still gonna be the Edward that everyone knows. I seriously want to say thank you to the viewers and to the fans who are going to be patient with me with my response after I do everything the right way. Seriously, you guys, from the bottom of my heart, thank you.
This is just bizarre.
Not only
to me, this seems like a little bit of like fan pleading.
Me, but everybody who's been affiliated with the YouTube channel. Thank you for changing our lives. Everyone who's a part of the YouTube channel. Anybody who was affiliated with it.
You guys really hate the speed that I have this on. Okay.
Anybody who's been in the videos, thank you. Seriously, you changed our lives dramatically. And I thought I would never get here in a million years at this point that we're at right now. It blows my mind, seriously. I could stand here and say thank you to you guys multiple times, but and everybody who's affiliated with the YouTube channel knows how much we thank you. So thank you.
So yeah, listen, I would have liked to see his response as well, but I think so. That's first and foremost. Yeah, I would have liked to see his response to it, but I think that we should understand that his response is just going to cause like a back and forth. There's going to be two people saying two different things that are going to, like, honestly, they're going to be advocating for their perspective more than anybody else. That's kind of the reality of the situation. I don't know, the whole fucking the last half of that felt like the first half of that I was like, yeah, that makes the most sense. You should deal with this legally. The second half felt like fan pleading for the most part. Yeah. So, listen, let me just recap this. So, one person actually asked a question. They said, blah, 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 blah. How is he going to litigate without going to jail for the age gap? So, I mentioned it before. In California, there is a law that basically, if you engage with somebody up to 10 with a 10-year age gap between 14 and 17, with an upwards of 10-year age gap, it's up to the judge's discretion whether that would be some kind of like sexual crime. So if they did actually litigate that, he probably would end up getting off with that.